What if spiritual concepts like ascension weren't just metaphors? What if they actually operated under the same physical laws that govern our entire universe? Well, today we're diving into a source that makes a pretty incredible claim, that there's a direct link between modern physics and a mechanism for spiritual transition described in the Quran.
Okay, so this whole idea, it really hinges on this one single rule from physics. You've got to get this down. Think of it like this. For anything to level up, and it doesn't matter if it's a tiny electron or, say, human consciousness, its core information, its blueprint, absolutely has to be preserved. No information, no transition. Simple as that.
And here is where it gets really wild. The source we're looking at takes this law out of the physics lab and applies it directly to us, to our consciousness. The argument is that for our consciousness to ascend to a higher state, it also needs to hold on to a set of preserved information. And within this framework, that essential data is called the book.
So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with that quantum rule and see how it builds a spiritual mechanism. Then, we'll get into something called the phase ladder operators. Phase what's known as the ultimate test. And finally, see how all of this presents resurrection as a science.
So what does this all mean for us? The source calls it state transition under conserved reference. Yeah, I know, it sounds a little academic, but the idea is actually pretty intuitive. It's just that our consciousness can move between different states, like life and whatever comes next, but only if it has a stable reference point, a kind of North Star to hold on to during the journey. So let's be super clear here. In this model, the book is not just a nice story or a metaphor. Nope, it's presented as a physical requirement, the actual data package, the source code that your consciousness has to carry with it to make the jump without just, collapsing into nothing. Okay, and this leads us to the phase ladder. Now, this is where the interpretation gets really radical. The source suggests that key prophetic figures aren't just historical teachers. Instead, it frames them as operators who are literally executing specific functions in a physical process. It's like they're steps in a cosmic algorithm. So, step one of the process, you have to establish a stable starting point. This job, according to the source, goes to the prophetic figure Yahya. His function is to act as the access node, the entry key that locks you into the whole system so the transition can even begin. And you can see the direct parallel to physics right here. Yahya's function is called a reference lock. In physics, this is basically the same thing as ground state coherence. You're getting the system into its most stable, fundamental state so it doesn't just fly apart before you even get started.
And check this out. The source points to this verse as the literal instruction for this first step. It's not just a poetic call to belief, it's a direct command to engage the reference lock. Hold firmly to the book.
Okay, so the system is locked and stable. Now what? Well, that information, the book, it needs a way to be carried across the gap. And according to this model, that is the specific function of the prophetic figure, Esa.
Now, this is a really important distinction. Isa's function isn't about raw force or chaotic energy, like heat, which just destroys things. No, it's an information field. Think of it as light with instructions. And that's absolutely crucial because it means you can perform incredibly complex operations, like life, death, and even revival, without corrupting or destroying the core data.
All right, on to operator number 3 in this sequence. This is the one who actually handles the big move itself, the transition, and that role is assigned to the prophet Musa.
And the source is crystal clear on this point. Musa doesn't climb anything, he executes a state transition. His function is the energy level jump, a quantum-like leap that allows consciousness to cross from one domain to another without being destroyed in the process. So all of this, the lock, the carry, the jump, it's all building up to one single make-or-break moment. The source calls this the node of Razīm, and it defines it as a point of maximum stress, a final threshold, a moment of judgment.
And at this critical point, the outcome is totally binary. It all comes back to that first rule we talked about. You have to preserve the information. If you drop the reference, if you let go of the book, the system collapses. It burns. But if you hold on, then the system transforms and you emerge into a higher state. And the source is really emphatic here. This isn't being presented as theology or metaphor, it's being presented as transition physics. These are the rules that govern how things change states, period. And if you want to see this algorithm in action, the source points straight to the story of the prophet Yusuf. Think about it.
He descends into a low-energy state, literally, a well. But the critical thing is, he holds his integrity. He maintains his internal reference, and what happens? He doesn't just get out, he emerges in a higher state, rising to power. It's a perfect illustration of conserving your state through extreme conditions.
So now let's take this whole physical framework and apply it to one of the biggest concepts of all, resurrection. The logic here is actually pretty straightforward and, well, kind of elegant. If life is just a coherent structure, and death is the loss of that coherence, then what is resurrection? It's simply re-establishing that coherence. But, and this is the absolute key, that's only physically possible if the original blueprint, that conserved information in the book, is still available to rebuild from. And to really make this idea stick, the source keeps coming back to the perfect analogy, the behavior of light. We already know from quantum mechanics that light exists in distinct energy levels, and photons make quantum leaps between them. They don't slide, they jump. The claim here is that human consciousness operates under the exact same rule, making quantized jumps to higher states, all governed by that same law of information conservation.
Okay, let's put it all together. Let's look at the full mechanism from start to finish as one single flowing operation. This is the literal Quranic mechanism of ascension.
So let's just walk through it one more time. It all starts with Yahya, who performs the lock, holding the reference. From there, Isa executes the carry, embodying and transporting that knowledge. Then, Musa performs the transition, the actual jump to a higher state. And finally, at that ultimate threshold, the source identifies the role of Ahmed as the one who holds that reference at the node of Razīm, which is what makes resurrection a physical possibility. You see? It's a complete, sequential operation.
And really, that's the whole mind-bending claim right there. That these ancient stories are not just allegories, they're descriptions of a physical process. The fundamental physics of how light emerges and changes levels, just translated into the language of our human reality.
So we'll just leave you with this question to chew on. If consciousness and its transformations are really governed by the literal laws of physics, as this source suggests, then what does that make the Quran? It stops being just a holy book or a guide. It becomes something else entirely, an operational manual.